1, 2.
We have
Leave it to
Caesar
Greg.
back. Be nice to Caesar. We like him.
Let us know when you're ready, Caesar.
We're going to start.
Ready? Okay. All right. Okay, we'll start the Board of Pharmacy meeting. Do you want to do a roll call? You want to start out, Greg?
Sure. Greg Lippy, public member.
Victor Law, professional member.
Lavanza Butler, professional member.
Debbie Veal, professional member.
Amy Gutierrez, professional member.
Stan Weiser, professional member.
Albert Wong, professional member.
Okay, we'll move on to the second item, which is public comments for items that are not on the agenda or agenda items for future meetings. Are there any public comments? Good morning.
My name is Pete Speranza, and I'm General Counsel for One Point Patient Care. We submitted an application for a non-resident pharmacy. Oh, sure.
We got to make sure we hear you.
Sure. Okay, sorry. So my name is Pete Speranza, and I'm a General Counsel for One Point Patient Care. We're a hospice pharmacy. We have 8 locations located throughout the country. Our main location is in both Morton Grove and Arizona. And we submitted a non-resident pharmacy application to the board back in March. And I'm here today to address the board on the issue of, I think it's number 6 on your agenda, 6D, that deals with a trust being in the ownership of the pharmacy. Our application is One Point Patient Care LLC, so the application is being submitted by a limited liability company, not a trust. Now, we do have a trust in the ownership, but it's kind of down the line in terms of where that ownership ends up. So there's a corporation and another LLC that owns our company, and then in those 2 structures, there's 2 trusts.
Do you plan on being here during the discussion?
I do,
That
yes.
agenda item? Okay.
I'm gonna
So,
stay.
Yeah, so we'll probably go into the details at the time of that agenda item. The focus right now is any public comments for any items that are not on the agenda.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was told
Yeah.
that this was the time to come up and speak about this, but if you want me to wait and comment then, I'm more than willing to
Yes,
do
that would be probably best when we've got the agenda item before the board.
Okay,
Yeah, because that way the board can ask you questions they really cannot now because it's
sure.
unagendized.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, we'll move on to approval of the minutes. First is approval of the February 24th to 25th, 2016 minutes. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
I'll
Second.
second.
Okay. Any public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion for approval for the June 7th to 8th and the June 8th minutes.
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
Stan, move.
Either one.
Okay, Greg, second.
Doesn't matter.
All right, any public comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
July 1st, board meeting. Motion for approval.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Any public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so that was one of my favorite parts of the meeting.
July 1st?
Yes, we just did July 1st.
I thought we just did June 8th. Okay.
I combined the June 8th and the June 7th to 8th. Okay, so we're all set. So we have 2 pharmacists for recognition licensed in California for 50 years. So we'll start out with Loyal Hutchinson. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Just fine, thank you.
Well, welcome and congratulations on your 50 years.
Thank you.
That is quite an honor.
Yes, thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background? I know we talked earlier, and you have done quite a bit in the same location, right, in Stockton.
Right.
So can you tell us about your background?
Yes, I'm a native of Stockton and grew up and went to and was educated there and come out of UOP's pharmacy school in '66. And then I went to work at a pharmacy that was in the lower socioeconomic area of Stockton, and found out that the needs and the challenges were greater there than other parts of the town. And so I ended up staying in that location for the almost 50 years. Enjoyed every minute of it.
That is great. I know that it's actually an honor to serve the lower, the socioeconomic. They actually need quite a bit of care.
Right, need more, yes.
Yes. Well, good. Well, congratulations, and you've enjoyed. Now retired?
Retired.
Any hobbies? Anything you're
Well,
doing now?
no, just yard work and that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's always that.
Yard work's always there.
There.
Now I know you've got your lovely wife Jean here. You want to come up, Jean? We're going to take some pictures. Welcome. So you're an important part of this. You've supported him for 50 years.
Right. I was a banker for 50 years.
How were you?
Yeah, so I didn't work in the pharmacy.
Oh wow. So did she do your books?
I did the books.
Okay. All right. Well, here is your pin for 50 years, and congratulations on behalf of the board.
Thank you.
Want to do a picture? Yes. Do you want to come here next? Come here next to your husband. Thank you. Thank you, Jean. Very nice to meet you. Thank you, Lyle. Thanks for coming. Kenya. Kingman Sue? Hello, how are you?
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Congratulations.
Thank you.
On your 50 years. Now, I know you've been with the California Department of Public...
Department of Health Services.
Okay, tell us what you do.
Well, I initially was in the prior authorization department for a couple of years, then eventually went over to the Audits and Investigations Division, which I spent 25 years, and then retired about 14 years ago from the department, then went to work for Kaiser in Livermore, and I've been there for 14 years.
Wow, are you still working there?
Working there on short hour and 1 day a week now.
Great. In retail pharmacy or hospital?
I started out with retail pharmacy at Long's Drug Store for about a year, then was drafted in the Army for 2 years, and went back into retail until I went to Department of Health Services.
Wow, you have a long career, a lot of different roles.
Many different roles.
And where did you go to school?
UCSF,
Okay,
class of
great.
1966.
Very good. Well, congratulations. Did you have anyone with you today that you'd like to bring up?
Unfortunately, she was unable to come because she's working.
Oh, okay. Oh, you're here. Oh, good. I should have had you do this.
Well, he's the friend and he's the ski buddy. So, and he also worked for me for a little while too. So Kingman's a great friend. So I want to come in, take a picture with him.
Yes.
Let me get your pen. Here's your pen.
Yes. Okay. You did good. Okay.
Sure can.
Terrific.
Thank you, Kingman.
Thank you.
Okay, here we go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we're around this place.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming. We
Cool.
appreciate
Thank you
it.
very
and
much. Thank you. Albert.
Congratulations. Okay, we'll move on since we don't have medical board here just yet. Oh, you are here? Oh, we have another one? Oh. Thank you. Do you want to come up? Hello. Good morning. What's your name?
Phil Grouse.
Phil Grouse.
Grouse,
Okay,
yep.
Phil, tell us about yourself.
Well, let's see, probably one of the better was I was a student at UC Berkeley, and I'd been there for almost 2 years, and my, I guess, counselor, whoever, called me in and said, Mr. Grouse, you've been here for almost 2 years now, you need to declare a major. And he says, you don't have quite enough units yet to go into medicine. He goes, but you could get into pharmacy. And I said, yeah, that sounds good. So 50 years later, that's where we're at. So
Great. Where did you go to pharmacy school?
USC.
Okay.
USC.
Yeah. That's great.
It was fun. It's a good school. And I worked with retail, and I've been with Kaiser Permanente for 40 years now. And I was with Save On Drugs when they were around, and Thrifty Drugs in the old days. And in fact, I applied for the State Board of Pharmacy. I was a candidate in 2002, and I had everything submitted. I had all the documents from all the politicians and everybody. And I think Rite Aid moved into the area about that time, and I'm not quite sure, but they got the they got the position, so I didn't. But anyway, it was a great experience. So it's been fun.
Good. Well, congratulations, and thanks for your years of service to the consumers of California.
It's been a pleasure.
Do you have anyone here with you?
Just some guys right here.
All right, you want to say something here?
Fred Mayer.
Hey, Fred.
Fred Mayer. For you folks don't know, Fast Phil Grouse did the Tech Check Tech. 10 years ago, the board tried to slip over checking technicians to fill prescriptions, and Phil Grouse single-handedly stopped that movement. I see it's on the agenda, and this is not the time and place, but we're going to be there. We don't want checking tech. We need to get the pharmacists out there.
You missed public comment, Fred.
Apologize. Mark Rouse.
I'm good.
Mark Rouse from Rayleigh's.
Well, Phil has been an advocate for pharmacy and for patient care for a long time, and it's great to see that he's getting recognized for his 50 years of service.
Thank you. There you go, Phil. Congratulations to you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yes.
Sure.
For our newsletter, make it good.
Get you in here.
All right. Let's see. What? Want me to take it for
Oh,
you?
yeah, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Fred.
Thank you, board.
Thank you so much.
Very nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So do we have any other 50-year? Nope? Okay. I think we got it. Okay, so we'll move on to the licensing committee report. So I'll turn this over to Chair Stan Weiser to provide us with a licensing committee report.
Thank you, Madam President. May have to start getting used to that term.
Very good.
No political statement.
Yes.
Regarding consideration of possible revisions to our regulations regarding pharmacy tech training programs. So for several meetings, the committee has been discussing the requirements for licensure as a pharmacy tech. And by the way, attachment number 1 would be helpful if anybody has it out there to look at that as well. I'll give you a little room here, Ricardo. So as part of its discussion, the committee has reviewed various pathways to licensure as well as enforcement actions and denials of tech applications. The committee has heard presentations about the certification exams used for licensure, presentations by various employers about their training programs, as well as a presentation about upcoming changes to the tech training programs accredited by the American Association of Health System Pharmacists. The committee and the board have expressed concern about some individuals that are seeking licensure through technician training programs, and these programs can be quite costly. Applicants who have criminal backgrounds, that will most likely result in a denial of their application with the board to become licensed as pharmacy techs. So the committee recognizes that not all such training programs are equal in terms of quality of the program. But the committee did express concern that the minimum requirements established in the law for such programs may no longer be adequate. So during our January 2016 board meeting, we agreed in concept, that's we the board, with the recommendations of the committee to modify Title 16 CCR 1793.6 to strengthen the requirements of some pharmacy technician programs by including a minimum age requirement, 18 years old, requiring a criminal background check, and requiring administration of at least one drug test. Further, the program would be required to administer a final exam. The committee discussed the possible changes again during its March meeting and advised the board during the April board meeting that it continues in its efforts. So the committee discussed the proposed language in detail and heard public comment in support of the regulation. So our committee recommendation is to approve the proposed amendments to section 1793.6, incorporating the changes suggested by our legal counsel. And if I may push the patience of the board, we've heard this many times before. I'm going to do it one more time anyway. So training course is specified by the board. This is 1793.6. A course of training that meets the requirements, this is attachment 1, of Business and Professional Code, section 4202. A2 is A. So here's the ways that technicians can become technicians. Any pharmacy technician program accredited by the American Society of Healthcare Pharmacists. Take that, and it eligibilizes you for licensure, at least application of a license. Any pharmacy technician training program provided by a branch of the Federal Armed Services for which the applicant possesses a certificate of completion. So those two have been part of our regs, and those two remain unchanged as part of our regs. But where we tried to strengthen the regs is in C, which is any other course that provides a training period of at least 240 hours of instruction covering at least the following: knowledge and understanding of different pharmacy practice settings, knowledge and understanding of the duties and responsibilities of pharmacy tech in relationship to other pharmacy personnel, and knowledge and standards and ethics, laws, and regulations governing the practice of pharmacy, knowledge and ability to identify and employ pharmaceutical medical terms, abbreviations, and symbols commonly used in prescribing, dispensing, and record keeping of medications, knowledge of and the ability to carry out calculations required for common dosage determination employing both the metric and the apothecary systems, knowledge and understanding of the identification of drugs, drug doses, dosages, routes of administration, dosage forms, and storage requirements, knowledge of and ability to perform the manipulative and record-keeping functions involved in and related to dispensing prescriptions, knowledge of and the ability to perform procedures and techniques relating to manufacturing, packaging, and labeling of drug products. All those that I just mentioned have been part of our regulation and will continue part of our regulation. But we're additionally, so in addition to the content of coursework specified in C1, which is what I just verbalized, the course of training must also satisfy all of the following. A, prior to admission to the course of training, an administrator or instructor must conduct a criminal background check and counsel applicants to the program about the negative impact to securing licensure if the background check reveals criminal history. This gets back to the 18-year deal, where you have to be at least 18 years old in order to get a criminal background check. Somebody's got to be over 18 to B, administer at least one drug screening to evaluate use of illicit drugs or use of drugs without a prescription. The result of any screen shall be considered as part of the evaluation criteria to determine acceptance into the course of training or appropriateness of continuation in the course of training. An administrator or instructor shall counsel students about the negative impact of a positive drug screening on eligibility for licensure.
Hey, Stan, Caesar's asking you to get closer to the mic.
Okay, good. Do you need me to repeat anything? Okay.
All of it.
I want to make sure
You start back at the
they
very beginning.
didn't miss a word. Kind of a knee-jerk no. And require students to be, I just said this, 18 years of age prior to beginning the instruction. And D, require a final exam that demonstrates the student's understanding and ability to perform or apply each subject area identified in subsection 1, which I read already. So that is the recommendation from the committee, Madam President.
I have a couple of questions. On the reference to manufacturing, is that still what we are doing? I'm just wondering if that's the appropriate term for pharmacy practice.
Which one?
That's on number, actually, G, the new C1G. Okay. Okay, I'm just concerned, the word manufacturing, I mean, just compounding probably would have been a better term. And the other question I have is under knowledge and understanding of different pharmacy settings, what does different mean?
Give me
That's that's vague. It's under
Well,
C1A.
So I think what happens is in these classes, these courses, that they teach the students about, community retail, hospital, and so I think they just kind of give them an exposure to the different
Right, that's the different settings.
settings for
So
pharmacy practice.
the understanding is that it would cover all of the settings at a pharmacy, or the
An
majority.
understanding, I mean, not an expertise, but so they understand that there are different practice settings.
This isn't community specific.
Right. No, I just want to make sure that what the different just seems very, it just seems a little vague, but okay. And then this is not we still allow a pharmacy tech to pass PTCB and be licensed. This is only referring to training courses.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay? So, Madam President, committee recommends this for approval by the board.
Second.
No, you
You don't need a second if there's
But
a
thank you anyway. Your
a
support-
committee.
Your support is always appreciated.
Okay, are there any public comment? Board member comments, no? Okay, all in favor? Oh, wait, we have a public? I did. No one came up. All in favor?
Right. A grand slam, thank you.
And just, if I may, just to be really clear about what it is that the board is doing, that you're basically initiating the rulemaking process, so staff will prepare all the documents that it needs to prepare.
Right.
Those documents will be sent out to the public, and then the formal rulemaking process, will now begin. So in case there was any doubt about that,
Thank you, Laura.
Embedded in there, we're giving the executive officer the ability to make
that, actually, you'll get to that part later if you need
Okay.
to. That's kind of toward the end of the regulation. First, you just got to get it started, but I didn't want there to be any doubt about that this is the formal approval to begin the rulemaking process.
So there's still plenty of time for public comment from the public.
Absolutely. The public comments start, the formal public comment as part of the Administrative Procedure Act is going to start once that notice and all those documents go out. So everybody gets another.
Thank you. But that's no different than any other, that's no different
Correct.
than any other
Correct. It's just-
action that we've taken.
Just like other
similar to this.
regulations. It was
Okay.
just more that the motion wasn't, normally your motion is a little more specific about to initiate the rulemaking process, so.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So moving along, consideration of duties of a pharmacy tech and discussion on the pharmacist to pharmacy tech ratio in community pharmacy, community settings. Attachment number 2. So Business and Professional Code 4115 specifies that a pharmacy tech may perform packaging, manipulative, repetitive, and other non-discretionary tasks only while assisting and under direct supervision and control of a pharmacist. Further, Title 16, California Code Reg 1793.2 specifies, excuse me, specific duties that may be performed by a pharmacy technician. As listed below, and attachment number 2 contains the various statutory and regulatory references related to pharmacy technicians. So, we've talked about it a million times. A tech can remove the drugs or drug from stock, counting, pouring, or mixing pharmaceuticals, placing the product into a container, affixing the label or labels to the container, packaging and repackaging. During our April board meeting, the board requested that this committee discuss the current pharmacist to pharmacy tech ratio. To begin discussion, board staff suggested that the committee focus on the community practice setting first. So all of this is community. Preparation for the first discussion, board staff reviewed how various states regulate pharmacy technicians. Based on the review, it appears that 45 states require either registration or licensure as a pharmacy tech. Tasks that may be performed by technicians vary from state to state. For example, in Alabama, pharmacy technicians may not handle controlled substances, whereas in Utah, in addition to duties consistent with pharmacy technician duties in California, a tech may also counsel on OTC drugs and dietary supplements under the supervision of a pharmacist, as well as accept new prescription drug orders left on a voicemail for a pharmacist's review. In Alaska, if a pharmacy technician will assist in the preparation of a sterile pharmaceuticals, the technician must have completed a minimum of 40 hours of on-job training in the preparation, sterilization, aseptic technique, and admixture of parental and other sterile pharmaceuticals before the pharmacy technician may regularly perform the tasks. Ratio requirements vary as well. For example, in Washington, the ratio is 1-to-1, unless the medication is dispensed to a patient in a healthcare facility, where the ratio is 1-to-3. That would be 1 pharmacist, 3 techs. Washington also allows a pharmacy to submit a service plan to increase the number of pharmacy techs a pharmacist may supervise. In South Carolina, the ratio is 1 pharmacist to 2 techs. However, the ratio may increase 1-to-3 if 2 of the 3 technicians are certified by a board-approved program. Some states do not have specified specific ratios. Just to remind everybody, in California, pharmacist number 1 and Stan's drug, Stan's the pharmacist, gets 1 tech. If Albert comes in, and it's always nice to have Albert work for me, by the way. So if Albert
I hear
comes
he
in,
actually works a lot harder than Stan.
and now we have Stan with 1 tech. You can't afford Albert, because he needs more help, gets to have 2 techs. So the second pharmacist thereafter get a 2 tech ratio, 2-to-1 ratio. And in California currently, a clerk can input information from the prescription into the computer for the benefit of the pharmacist and the patient.
And there's no limit on the number of clerks in the pharmacy, is that
Not
correct?
that I'm aware of.
Dan, can I just ask a question? Because in reviewing this, and I'm looking at the definition of a pharmacy technician, I can think of other roles that pharmacy technicians are providing service that don't fall into direct counting and pouring and prescribing. Are we considering, or is the licensing committee considering looking at that? I mean, I know that there's locations where pharmacy techs are working, doing prior authorization and other type of work that does not involve just this. I think this is very limited scope.
So when you were talking about
Reviewing some of the, working, like for example, the mail order pharmacies that they're working in. There's a lot of other type of roles that may not specifically involve the non-discretionary task. I know I've actually mentioned to Ginny, there's locations that hire techs just to do some refill processes.
And
when
there are some techs
Not a pharmacist.
that work on dealing with patients as far as their medication is concerned, calling them, making sure that they're not having any problems with their medication.
There's locations, actually, the case that I was talking to Jenny about, they're hiring pharmacy techs without a pharmacist, basically to do refills and recommend renewals. So is this something that we're concerned about?
Well, of course it's concerning.
Can I ask a question
Here,
on her question?
Here, let me finish.
Well, I just want to add to hers so that you can answer it maybe a smidgen bit more complete. Because right now, what Amy just referenced could actually be done by what we call a clerk also, since it's not defined in here, correct?
Correct.
I mean, I think we kind of assume they're techs because it's a more technical type of job, and it requires, we would think, more education, but I think technically,
A pharmacy technician only exists in a pharmacy under the supervision of a pharmacist. That individual may work in other environments, but he or she is not acting as a tech, using the tech license. The requirements for the technician is you are in the pharmacy. So sometimes techs are hired by physicians, for example. But again, they're employees of the physician. They may have a tech registration, but they're not working as a pharmacy technician.
So the only time they're a pharmacy technician is when they're inside of a pharmacy.
Exactly.
And they're counting and pouring or doing any of the tasks that are in here.
The law-
Otherwise.
But getting
is
to
there
your
any-
question.
Yeah.
So the way that I see this, and again, I want to thank you for allowing me to continue on the licensing committee, because I think these are all steps in hopefully in the evolution of what a pharmacy tech can do and how many pharmacy techs, and steps that will help support the pharmacist as that role evolves as well. So right now, you know, what are we looking at? We're looking at the education, and we're trying to,
Great.
you know, make sure that the standards for the educational process are good and sound and appropriate standards. So we're looking at that. And our next, you know, and now we're looking at the ratios. There's no doubt that we're going to have to take a good look at what the responsibilities a tech has, and should we look to expand those, or if there's any reason to expand them at all. But it's, you know, it's just, it's, you know, I look at it as being building blocks, and so we're
Yeah.
going forward. And
No, and I think that's a great start for the committee to start looking at that. And I also agree with the review, but I also, the whole issue of clerks in a pharmacy is concerning, because I think sometimes the clerk is there, and they may be a licensed pharmacy tech, but they're under a clerk name, but they're really a tech.
Yeah.
And this is kind of a game playing that's going on that I think we need to really figure out what we're going to do with that.
Amy, but I think you have more than one technician working in a pharmacy, but you have to designate one pharmacy tech who's on duty could perform those duties. But you can have more than one tech in the pharmacy doing other clerical work.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on that too, because I've gone in so many stores where I see 5 techs in the back, but I have to assume that only one is working as a tech.
But you see them doing
Oh,
other things.
yeah,
You
I
see them
can't
doing
tell you how
technician
many
work.
stores I've gone into, and there's 4 or 5 techs on duty. And I have to question, well, there's supposed to be 1 tech per pharmacist, but I'm told that only 1 is doing tech work. But I don't know, I think this is something we need to be looking at seriously.
well, so looking at the techs and how many pharmacists and how many techs, you know, is kind of where the direction we're going in right now. So the committee's discussion and recommendations, the committee discussed it if there was a need and/or a demand to change the current ratio, 1-to-1, 1-to-2, yeah, for the second pharmacist. Members noted that a change in the ratio requirement may be appropriate if it makes the pharmacist more accessible to the consumers. And that's a big issue for the committee. I mean, we want to make sure that there's, you know, plenty of support help for the pharmacists, and support help that has gone through a program that eligibilizes these people to act in that capacity. But in the event that we do add to the tech ratio, we want to make sure that it's to the benefit of the patient and not to the benefit of Stan's drug, causing the pharmacist to fill twice as many prescriptions because the pharmacist has twice the support staff. Cheryl, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on that, right. And I think that's extremely important to look at, because at the end of the day, we're here for public protection and not for the number of prescriptions being filled. I mean, you know, because again, the other thing is when it's the pharmacist's responsibility. And I see so many cases that we get where where drugs are being are missing, and it's that pharmacist goes down also. So for a pharmacist to have to be responsible for a tech, we definitely need to look at that when we're talking about increasing ratios. When I go to a pharmacy and see 5 techs back there, and then I'm being told that only 1 is functioning as a tech, but yet that pharmacist is going to be responsible for what happens back there.
And getting back to the evolution of the pharmacist, I mean, AB or 493, SB 493, as we look at the expectations and responsibilities of the pharmacist to be more engaged in the health care of the community, and be more and add to the access, add to the availability, add to the health awareness, you know. So we need the pharmacist to get out there and be engaged with customers, patients, whatever we want to call them. And maybe it's the only way to get the pharmacists out there is to increase the tech ratio. But again, the purpose of doing that, in my mind, is to get the pharmacists out there to get the benefit of the community.
Well, if you increase the number of techs to allow the pharmacists to be out there, who's supervising the techs while they're doing their work?
Well, I mean, first of all, Stan's
How do you
Drug is
do
a
that?
very small place. But I don't know if anybody's here from Walgreens. But we had a very interesting presentation, it could be a year ago now, from Walgreens, where
The cameras.
where it you know, now the pharmacist was at a desk, if you
Right.
can imagine,
I remember.
at the front of the store, and in front of the pharmacist were some video screens supposedly watching all the texts. Now, I'm not endorsing that, and I don't know if the board will accept that, but we're looking at different models of pharmacy, and the purpose is to get the pharmacist to be more available to the patient for the purpose of good health and good information. So, but you're right, who's watching the stores?
Yeah, I mean,
Joe
obviously, in
goes.
a perfect world, if the cost was not an issue, you'd have more than one pharmacist. You'd have one out there and one supervisor. But I understand the issue.
There's a variety of scenarios. Yes, Victor?
But regardless of the ratio of the pharmacists and technicians, the final checks still have to be made by the pharmacist. So you're always responsible. But the 1-to-1 ratio in the law has been here for a long time. So it's in the 20th century. So I think we need to take a look at it and have to evaluate if we do make a change to it. But like I said, regardless of what, the pharmacists, they have to do the ultimate check, and they are ultimately responsible for the technician's job.
Stan, I'm all for for the pharmacists to have more time to go out and do the consultation. But when what I'm worried about, when you have more tech, you fill more prescription. Nowadays, the pharmacists don't fill any prescription. All the techs doing all the filling. So the pharmacist's responsibility to check the prescription and do the consultation. But when you have 2 technicians filling all the prescription, this same one pharmacist still have to check double the amount of prescription. Where you go find the time to do the consultation? That's what I'm worried about.
There's no doubt that that this is a double-edged sword. And there's no doubt that this is something that we have to look at, taking into consideration all the issues that it brings to the front of our minds, not just the ability to get the pharmacist out, but the impact it'll have on that particular pharmacist. Our main scope here is the protection of the community, the protection of the consumer. And so we certainly, want to make sure that that's our primary concern. But on the other hand, it has to be, we have to bring into consideration access. And as the pharmacy becomes more a part of the health care needs of a community, we're just going to have to find ways for the pharmacist to be accessible.
Maybe the answer is a greater trained tech, somebody education-wise, where they're trained closer to that of a pharmacist,
Well,
so that they can,
You know,
you can rely on them to a certain extent.
talking about steps, and so we just did something, I think, that was significant with these classes. The classes, there have been good ones and not so good ones. And there have been those who have been very informative to incoming students and acted responsibly, and those that maybe weren't as responsible. And so, again, we're trying to look at it all, put together a better educated tech, and then look for opportunities that tech can supplement the needs of the pharmacists.
Yeah, and I'd like to see if the committee can really get stakeholder input from the pharmacist community. I mean, I know this is a big economic issue for businesses, but we need to ensure that the pharmacists that are out there that have to do the counseling, that are required to maintain controls on drug diversion, that have to check the prescriptions, the increased load, that their input is actually actively involved in when we decide on these ratios.
Absolutely. And what the committee's recommendation is to convene a summit with stakeholders to discuss this issue. And I think that's very important. I agree with you 100%, as does the committee. And so that's the recommendation of the committee, that we reach out to the stakeholders, be it, I see John Roth is here, CPHA, as well as different, Mary's here, other organizations that deal with pharmacists and pharmacies and Walgreens and CVS, because this is an important issue, and we need the input from the stakeholders to find out really, what's a good direction to go here. At least I feel that way.
I think that's a great recommendation. I think that's a good place to start, is to get all the stakeholders together.
Yeah,
So I appreciate
yeah.
the committee's foresight.
Thank you, Debbie. Anyway, I'm going to move on.
A public comment.
Fred,
Also,
absolutely, Fred.
and also, if, I know that was a committee recommendation, but you may want, just one moment, sir. I'm sorry. Do you mind waiting just one moment? So I think it was a recommendation from the committee. I think you would want the board's approval to convene that.
Do you think we need that to be a motion, just to have a summit with the stakeholders?
I don't think it's necessary, but I think since you've made a recommendation to the board, it sort of.
I'll leave that at your discretion,
It wouldn't
Madam
hurt,
President.
Stan. It wouldn't hurt. I mean, well, let's follow Laura's advice. It wouldn't hurt to do that.
Okay.
The committee's made a recommendation.
So the recommendation of the committee, and we would hope for the board's support, is to convene a summit with stakeholders to discuss the issue.
Okay, thank you. And now we've got public comment.
Sorry about that. Thank you.
Do I have a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes? What?
2 minutes. 2 minutes, Fred.
2 minutes. My name is Fred Mayer. I represent Pharmacist Planning Services, a 501c3 consumer pharmacy public health nonprofit organization. Been around 60 years. I have a master's of public health. I'm a registered pharmacist for 62 years.
63?
Sir?
How many years?
62.
62.
So you gave me a 50-year pin about 12 years ago, and I thank you.
That'd be 62, all right.
But that doesn't count on my time. Wait a minute. Stan, don't interrupt me.
What did you do the first year, Fred?
Let me start by saying I was on 20 years ago, we had a manpower study, and I was on the manpower study committee, and we studied it for 2 years. And we picked the ratio 1-to-1 because of the problems in those days. Now it's very more complicated. I heard from Albert Wong, we not only have to do counseling, we not only have to look at the screen, we now are giving immunizations, and now we're going into SB 493. As a consumer advocate, I totally agree the pharmacists underutilized. You need to get them out front. The problem is he or she cannot be out front and in the back watching the prescriptions and be liable for the prescriptions while a tech checks a tech or whatever system you want to do. So I do agree you need a summit, you need more hearings. We'd like to have a community pharmacist. I'm still a practicing pharmacist with a license. But my big concern is I walk into my local Safeway in Novato, and I've mentioned this before to the board. There are 10 people in red coats at my local Safeway in Novato, California, which is where I live in Marin County. There are 10 red coats, and there's one pharmacist who's 82 years of age. He's back in the back filling prescriptions. They got 10 people lined up in front, in between the pharmacist and giving immunization. He closes down to go give an immunization. In between, we got people screaming and hollering with a standard of practice that I don't know where it comes from. But as a consumer advocacy group, in the interest of public health and safety, I think it's your job, you, the board, to put in some metrics. That pharmacist can't be filling 500 prescriptions and have one pharmacist on the case with an additional 10 people feeding him more stuff. It can't be done in the back, the front, immunizations. So one of the things I'm saying is you, the Board of Pharmacy, need to do your job. I'm reporting right now the Novato in Safeway, 10 red coats. And again, I started to count them, and again, I started to go around to look. Everyone's got a badge. There is a clerk typist. There is a tech. There is an intern, there's a resident, there's a stockbroker, there's, a stock person who takes care of stock, there's a clerk typist, and there's 10 of these various people. So I don't know what you want to call these people one-to-one, but I know my daughter, where I went to pick up the prescription, there was no counseling. They didn't even offer to be counseled. The clerk came out and took the prescription,
So,
delivered the
sir,
prescription. My time's up.
No. I just, what I want to do is be sure that if, what your concern is, if you're trying to file a
My
complaint,
concern are people are dying, they're not getting health care.
Right, so I want to
Yeah.
focus on the
Right.
bigger
Let's-
picture issue as opposed to the specific
I'd like to
issue,
focus- I'd
because
like
it
to-
sounds like you
Yes, ma'am.
might want to file a complaint, and you can do that. I'm the counsel for the board.
Laura,
Yes.
so let me talk to you. There's 3 injunctions that were delivered by the district attorneys in San Diego. One was $500,000 for Rite Aid, the second one was CVS, and the third one was Walgreens. And you've got the injunction, you folks worked on it.
Fred,
It said-
we got
Fred,
to
we're-
stay on the point, I'm sorry.
Yeah, let's
Fred.
stay on the agenda, because we have to stick to the
you
agenda.
missed-
All right,
missed
so
public
we
comment.
want some hearings. Number one, as a consumer advocate, I'd like to see you do something about the number of errors that are caused, and I see the cite and fines. So number 3, I'd like to see some studies. We came before the board in September, Ginny, we came before the board in January, and you were going to do some kind of a survey. The pharmacists are overworked. They can't do what they're doing now, and now you're going to dump more technicians on them. You need to get some metrics to look at the prescription. That Safeway does 300 prescriptions with one pharmacist. Can't be done with immunizations all the workplace. So let me stop there and say, when is our next hearing? When can we look at that survey that you're supposed to be doing? As a consumer advocate, people are dying, and it's your responsibility in public health and safety to fix it. And so how you fix it is not by adding more people. You need more pharmacists. And you've got to get more pharmacists now, for me, the consumer, because I'm not getting counseling. I'm not getting somebody looking at the screen. I asked for an MTM, and they're too busy to do an MTM on me. So, okay, my time is up, Stan. So the point is, I'm very happy. Thank you for
Fred, needless to say, it's always exhilarating
exhilarating.
to have you make a presentation.
But it's more than exhilarating. I see the cite and fines. I've seen the injunctions against these 3 major chains, and nothing has changed, Jenny, because our president of the board of our board, Marin County Pharmacist, and we reported this error, went into the Safeway in Oakland and got a dose that would have killed her. All right,
Okay, so,
enough
so
of this.
I want, I just.
So one, I need some more inspections as a consumer advocate. You got 48 inspectors, right, Jenny? 46. Get them out there, and I want to see some counseling. I don't want to see 10 red coats in my Safeway in Nevada, and I'm reporting it. So why don't you come on down, send someone down there
So
and take a
no,
look and then
sir,
say, what are
I want you to sort of separate the specific complaints that you have about a particular pharmacy. The board can't, at this point, deal with those pieces because
Have you read
it
the
will
cite and
have to-
fines?
No, so I'm talking about what the board won't be able to act if you start talking about the details of a particular
No details.
situation.
Okay.
So that's my concern. That's what I'd like you to steer away
Okay.
from. Your policy concerns can be addressed to the board.
Laura, got it.
Specific cases, specific
Specific.
issues, specific facts shouldn't be
Okay,
mentioned to the
so
board.
specific, let's look at the 2-year-old.
Fred, our agenda item right now is we're voting to create a summit.
thank
We
you,
hope
Fred.
that you will attend the summit and participate and provide all of this input when the discussion takes place.
Sure.
But our voting today is just to move forward with
right.
that summit,
Okay.
with the licensing committee. So we hope you'll be there.
I will be there. I was on the manpower. I will be there in force.
Let us see if somebody else would like to give some public comment also.
Someone else talk, what'd you say?
Let us see if somebody else would like to give public comment as well.
Oh, absolutely. Sorry. Thank you for your comment.
Thank you, Fred. Always good to see
Fred.
you.
And can I just let Fred know that the Education and Public Communication Committee is working on the survey, and we'll have a report tomorrow on it.
Now, that's what they said in September. And then you told me that in January. When is the
Tomorrow.
survey done?
Okay.
Tomorrow.
Oh, no, this,
Tomorrow.
the survey's
No,
not done
no
tomorrow.
more coffee for Fred.
Follow me, get up here.
Any other public comment? Otherwise, there is a motion from the committee on the table.
Right. Thank you very much.
All in favor?
Okay, easy enough.
And I just want to recognize, Stan, that there's two board members that have come in. Ricardo and Ramon, do you want to announce yourselves?
Ricardo Sanchez, public member.
Ramon Castablanc, public member.
Thank you.
And before I go on to my next topic, you know, Fred always brings good stuff to the board, and Fred, it's always a pleasure to see you, always a pleasure to hear you. If anything, you certainly are a consumer advocate, and that's what we are as well. So thank you, Fred. All right. Consideration of possible revisions to pharmacists' renewal requirements and content-specific continuing education. Well, in November of 2015, the board initiated a rulemaking to amend Section 1732.5 to amend continuing education requirements to specify that 6 of the 30 hours required for pharmacist license renewal shall be completed in one or more of the following subject areas. 6, and Greg, you and I talked about this, 6 of the 30, so 20%. And so at the time, we were talking about, or it was suggested, that of those required topics, emergency disaster response, patient consultation, maintaining control of a pharmacy's drug inventory, ethics, substance abuse, including indications for red flags in a pharmacist's corresponding responsibility, and compounding. And you know, it seems as though when we started this whole discussion about continuing education, and might there be stuff out there that we should regulate a pharmacist to take, that the discussion started with the competency issue of a pharmacist. As far the longer he's out of school or she's out of school, what competency they still continue to maintain and how they are able to maintain it. So I think that's important that we keep that in the back of our mind, that that's what was the beginning of this whole discussion, was competency. So during the February 2016 board meeting, the board discussed this proposal and expressed some concern that the proposal may be over-regulating the continuing education requirements. Comments from the public included that pharmacists should be allowed to use their professional judgment to determine what continuing education he or she needs, while other commenters indicated that the board should consider simplifying the list. At the conclusion of the board's discussion, the board voted to refer the proposal back to the licensing committee to review and the continuing education content areas and to report back, as we're doing now. So the committee discussion and recommendation. The committee discussed the proposal and noted that many of the specified areas were important, including substance abuse, but noted that the topics may not be relevant for all pharmacists. The committee noted that some of the topics would be appropriate for licensees that are cited for violations. The committee heard public comment in support of requiring law updates as part of the continuing education requirement, and the committee recommendation was to withdraw the proposed regulation change, so not make it a requirement for any specific CE units in order to be eligible for your renewal, and as that included as part of your 30 units.
So-
And I might add, and I don't know when Madam President would like to deal with this, but in the Ledge Reg Committee report, and Greg, the chairman, is here, in the regulation agenda, Part 2, Item D, they too have reviewed this and have come up with a slightly different bent on it. And I had it dog-eared, but I don't anymore. But anyway, it depends on how you want to treat that, Amy. But the recommendation from the licensing committee is that everything remain the same, that we not overregulate the pharmacists into us demanding that there be specific items. They went through school, they picked all their classes, they graduated. I've always looked at pharmacists as being responsible people when it comes to remaining up to date and being proud of their profession. And I don't see where that has changed any. So I think at the time, the committee felt the same way.
Well, when we started this years back, I was chair of licensing. And the feeling was that there were certain topics that applied regardless. One being ethics, one being emergency disaster response, and there were some others. And this is not the first board to approach this. As I mentioned to you earlier, Stan, the State Board of Accountancy has required areas. And the profession there is just as professional as the profession, as pharmacy. So the issue here is I don't think it's over-regulating to require one course, 6 hours, in one of these areas, which at the time the licensing committee determined were the areas that were most important. Now, obviously, compounding is only important to somebody who's doing compounding. That doesn't necessarily have to be there in this list. But I think that to eliminate the list altogether after so much time was spent in coming up with specific areas that we felt were important is not the right way to go. Anyway, that's my feeling.
I'm very good, thank you. I think also that some of these are matters, ethics, for example, that every pharmacy should have. Now, in substance abuse, we have a problem because the board misinformed pharmacists for years on a script newsletter advising that there is not a serious problem with addiction with opioids. That was on our website until 2 years ago for all pharmacists to read. We were wrong. And these kinds of things need to be changed and corrected. The substance abuse problem, I know, is a major issue for pharmacists across the state of California. And I've been in meetings lately where I've been hearing, now the problem is pharmacists are not dispensing, and there's a lot of complaints about that. So I think that is something that we're not anywhere near, seeing the light at the end of the tunnel on that issue. And I would think that's a matter that should be of concern across the profession.
So is this also on the agenda for the Ledge Reg Committee this afternoon?
Yes, it is.
Well, we recommended that the board look at this because the licensing committee decided they wanted to get rid of the requirement altogether, and we decided that we wanted a second look at it by the board because we don't think it should be eliminated.
Victor?
I would kind of disagree with the above two gentlemen, because if you look at the licensing statistics, only 0.125% of the pharmacists who got into trouble, they were disciplined. So that means 99% of the pharmacists are doing the right thing. So why force all the other pharmacists to abide by this 6 hours CE or 30 hours CEs, whatever, up to their choice? Besides, we and Jenny have done several of these substance abuse pharmacist corresponding responsibility town hall meetings with different parts of the state, San Fernando, Downey, San Gabriel Valley, patient consultation, new laws affecting pharmacists. We have done that, so it's out of the outreach program for the board to go out there and inform the members. So out of the 30 hours, I think the pharmacists should have a choice to pick whatever they need. And individual corporations, if they think something is necessary for the corporation, they could mandate it on their own. Why would you need the state to regulate that? I think there's too much work that we do. Sometimes it's not the fact that you spend some time to it, you have to stick to it. If you're a gut of a gentleman, you make a mistake, admit you make a mistake, and back off.
So Laura, in terms of our jurisdiction here, we've got the licensing committee making a recommendation, and Ledge Reg is going to discuss it. What's your recommendation and how best to approach this?
I would actually recommend, just from an efficiency standpoint, is that you take the two items, consolidate them, and discuss them at once, either now or during licensing.
Okay,
It seems
so we
like
can do
you're
that right
already
now
on
then,
that.
since we're already started the discussion, we might as well
And
finish this.
just so that we're really clear on the agenda, that is Roman numeral 7, Part 2, Sub D, D1 technically.
Okay.
Part 2D.
Okay, so we've got a motion from the committee to withdraw the regulation. Okay, so there is any other board member comments besides those that have already expressed?
I'd like to express the fact that I think my professional judgment is adequate, and I know what continuing education I feel, and as I think that most pharmacists know what they feel like they need to get a little bit more education on. Maybe I need to fine-tune corresponding responsibilities, since that is something that the board is looking at now. I don't think that needs to be mandated. That's my opinion.
You know, we have lots of people from different settings here around the table, and we have lots of people out in our audience from different settings. I noticed that John Roth is here from the California Pharmacists Association. I would be, not to call on you every now and then, John, but I would be curious to know if they feel that pharmacists are in need of, if it's been problematic for pharmacists and therefore for the consumer, because pharmacists haven't been required to take a law class. Although I do know that on September 17th you are having a program on pharmacy law, but still, in spite of the fact that there might be a conflict, have pharmacists demonstrated the fact by their practice that they are not aware of laws and regulations of their profession. And the same thing with, I noticed Steve is here, and I know Steve was disappointed with the licensing committee's determination. And I'm not quite sure if you were representing Kaiser at the time of your disappointment, but I would be curious to know if Kaiser has a problem with pharmacists not being aware of law and regulation, and if your disappointment was as a representative of Kaiser, or if it was just a personal issue that you have.
And why don't we lead this into public comment?
Yeah.
And open it up so that we can hear from those stakeholders that are here.
I think that's great.
Any public comment? Anyone would like to step up, and John would come up? Good morning, John.
Well, thank you, John.
Nothing like getting called out up to public comment. No, thank you, Stan and President Gutierrez. CPH, the California Pharmacists Association, John Roth, CEO, we support the licensing committee's recommendation. We do think, and I think Victor stated it very well, that the data shows that pharmacists are using their judgment to determine where their areas of needed continuing education should lie, and are seeking out those courses appropriately to maintain their competency. We continually do things, as Stan mentioned, in terms of the law conference that's coming up in a month or so, providing new updates and new information for pharmacists and technicians so they can stay relevant and current on new developments in law and practice. But that's very different, I think, from a pharmacist determining their own individual needs for continuing education. So we do support the licensing committee's recommendation.
I just have a question. The very beginning of your statement, you said that the data shows that there's no need for, this type of continuing education. And I know that Victor pointed to the percent of pharmacists that you'll have disciplinary problems around substance abuse and ethics. What data are you pointing to?
Well, yeah, I was just making a general reference in terms of if there was an overwhelming need, if a number of pharmacists were being cited, for example, for issues relating to those subjects, then there may very well be a conversation the board would need to entail to require that pharmacists mandate that they take those CE programs. But I was simply pointing out that the data shows that that's not occurring, and so therefore allowing a pharmacist the opportunity to determine their own competency needs is a better course of action rather than a mandate where there's no profession-wide deficiency noted in the data.
Now, when you talk about data, are you aware of the complaint data that the board has? Do you know the patterns of complaints that we've been getting?
Generally speaking, but not specifically.
Yeah, we get about 50 disciplinary cases a month that we deal with, and a number of them are in the area of corresponding responsibility and ethic issues.
Okay.
So, I don't know what the statistics say, but I know what all the cases that we look at say.
But we have 50,000 registered pharmacists in the state of California. So even with your disciplinary cases, that stands for 0.12%. If you look at the statistic, get back out the statistic of the technician and the pharmacist. 0.12% overall pharmacists got into the disciplinary cases.
Well, we might want to look at the trend in complaints, because as I understand it, the complaints around substance abuse, around corresponding responsibility, have gone from a relatively low level to now the number 2 level of complaints that the Board of Pharmacy is getting.
And how many of those complaints are substantiated and result in a disciplinary
I don't know.
action?
Why don't we ask the folks from enforcement, our staff?
Well, and I guess as we maybe look to see if we have any of that kind of information, I guess I'm just having a little bit of a hard time bridging discipline, the percent of pharmacists who are being disciplined with competency. Because I think that, actually, I think some of the pharmacists who are disciplined are pretty competent, but maybe they're unethical or they have a drug abuse problem. And I think this is getting after competency and not and not just really focused on drug abuse. I mean, I think that was the focus of why we did it. And Stan, I'm number one, and I hate to overregulate. Well, and I'm really on the fence on this, trying to figure out how do we handle competency.
I would ask you the same question. I mean, you're involved with the largest pharmacy company probably in the world.
Until Rite Aid and Walgreens merge. Okay.
Certainly in the United States.
For a couple more months.
Certainly in the United States. And I don't know how much direct interaction you have with pharmacist issues. But I would ask you if you can say, your experience, your experience in the workforce is right at the trench level, in my mind. Do you see a lot of pharmacists working for the company that you work for that have issues with knowledge about regs and law? In this, forget any other state, just in the state of California.
Well, so I guess we're still talking about, and I'll be honest, we have mandatory CE.
I'm sure you do.
So there's certain CE that we require our pharmacists to take.
And I'm sure you give them lots of information as well.
To help with competency. And so that's where I'm kind of on the fence. So, okay, I think pharmacists in my organization may be handled, but my organization only represents maybe 10% of the pharmacists in California, and I guess I'm trying to look at it more big picture. Like I said, I'm on the fence here because I don't like overregulation, but I also respect that that we have a responsibility to the public around competency. And so I agree with you. I'm not sure this is the solution, but I'm wavering. So come on, keep giving me information.
Hammer away at her some more, will you, John?
Good morning, Steve.
Steve Gray. I'm with Kaiser Permanente, but on this subject, I'm speaking as an individual.
So you're not representing Kaiser.
I'm speaking as an individual. Okay. I am concerned also from what I've seen out there. I also teach law and ethics at UC San Diego, but I'm not speaking for UC San Diego. My point is that this started out in the history as a competency subject specific, with HIV and disaster planning and one thing after another. And I agree, it got to the point where it's, what's next? What are you going to add next, and are you going to take something off? What I was mentioning before at several occasions, including the last meeting of this group, also at the Ledge Reg and the Licensing Committee, is I believe there is an issue out there with pharmacists, and it's not 50,000. We need to get our numbers right. It's about 28,000 practicing pharmacists roughly in California that deal with pharmacy law and pharmacy practice every day. And there are many of them that are not up to date on the laws, regulations, and the hot topics that are facing pharmacy. And there's nothing in the law that says basically they have to be, except when someone comes around and tells them and finds out that they're not aware of certain things. Everything from consumer complaints about language interpretation, to consultation and the way it's enforced and what the inspection is, to corresponding responsibility, one thing after another. But I think it can be partially resolved by having a mandatory 2 hours for an example, 2 hours per 2-year session on law and ethics. Because when you give a law and ethics program, it's what CPHA does and they're going to do, it's what others do. You hit the hot topics, whether it's a change in the statute, a change in the regulation, a change in federal law and expectations, or a change in the way things are enforced and the way that the board policy has evolved. And to say that all of the pharmacists out there know what's expected of them is just unrealistic, because and other professions have addressed this. There are many other professions, and one I'm of course mostly familiar with is the law profession. There are mandatory subjects on whatever those topics are that have been identified by their licensing body as something to to deal with. There have been changes since this started. One of the changes that I mentioned before is, yes, the Board of Pharmacy puts out every year a very nice newsletter about the changes in law. But that newsletter is no longer distributed to all pharmacists. It's posted. And if you go out there and you want to do a survey, find out how many of them actually went in, looked at it, read it, and so forth. You will be surprised, perhaps, or maybe you won't be, on how often it is not read and is only referred to back, later when something happens. You've also recently changed your expectation on inspections. It used to be a long time ago that and I'm talking about 15, 20 years ago, the enforcement inspections were educational primarily, and pharmacists spent a lot of time learning. And now, with all of the pharmacies in California, even though you have more inspectors, your expectation has changed. Every 4 years will they get out and talk to people. If you want to look at statistics, I agree with Debbie. I'm concerned about looking at the discipline. For an example, look at the complaints. Look at the inspection reports. How many times, even on the inspection reports, are inspectors having to remind pharmacists and PICs of what the current law and interpretation is? So I think that it's quite reasonable to go back what was talked about at the last full board meeting, which is to give it to the licensing committee, have them narrow it down to something that is more reasonable, but not to do away with it entirely. I think that putting in there a 2-hour mandate every 2 years in law and ethics, current events and law and ethics in California is the right way to go. That way, with time, you will get much more knowledge and understanding of what's expected from all of our pharmacists. Now remember, some of the pharmacists that are taking the continuing professional education, or CPE, continuing pharmacist education, are also supervisors and managers who are probably the ones you want most to know about it, and they're not practicing every day and so forth, but they're providing guidance. So I think it's very important that you not do away with this and you go back to the idea of narrowing it but not doing away with it.
Steve, you come to us with your individual views and your presentation as an individual, not as somebody representing anybody. However, you do offer us the luxury of having knowledge about the pharmacists at Kaiser, one of the largest employers of pharmacists in the state of California. And I don't know if you're comfortable responding or if Lori would be comfortable, but are you aware of issues with your pharmacists at Kaiser, the people that you're intimately involved with, I would guess, are there issues regarding the law and regs that they are unfamiliar with? And does Kaiser, like so many others, besides the information from the pharmacy board, does Kaiser also have programs or newsletters, publications that they give to the pharmacists to make sure that if they haven't discovered it on their own, that yet here is more information for you regarding new regs, new laws, old laws?
Yeah, Stan, let me address that. I don't think there's any significant difference probably between the Kaiser pharmacist and all the other pharmacists as a whole. I mean, there's always going to be individual variations. Things are different by different organizations. Our support of continuing professional education is primarily through a benefit where the pharmacists can, use that financial benefit to go out and get, education. That's the primary way. We do have mandatory compliance classes periodically, some of them for federal law and things every year that you are required to do. But I'm not addressing that in particular. I think that there's so much, and those don't necessarily address the hot topics that the board is dealing with. I'm recommending this because I think it's a tool that the board needs to use to get the information out about changes in law, changes in interpretation, changes in expectations, more pervasive throughout all of the pharmacists in California as a tool, so that you'll have less of these problems, less of these complaints, less of the orders of correction on inspection reports, and less problems down the line. I think it's a tool that you're missing that other professional boards have found very valuable in meeting their responsibilities. And so I would recommend that you go forward. Remember that, I think it's great that CPHA and CSHP and some other organizations are presenting their programs on law updates. I look forward to the one on September 17th. I noticed that right away. But remember, less than 9% of the pharmacists in California belong to those organizations combined. So, they're not getting to everyone. Yes, you did a lot of meetings on corresponding responsibilities, great meetings, but actually how many numbers? What percentage of the 28 or 30,000 pharmacists did you actually get to speak to? And so forth. And some of those were duplicate, because I know I went to several of them. So, you're really, when you be careful about the statistics, because there's a lot out there you don't know about what people don't know that they don't even know about. I'm
going to have to
Quote
review that.
Quote Don Rumsfeld.
Yeah, to Rumsfeld. So I just think this is a tool you should go ahead and go forward with. We've had a lot of discussion, and you don't know what's going to come up tomorrow or the next day or next year, that you're not going to need to get the information out there in a way that really gets to 80, 90% of all the pharmacists in California. I think you're missing an opportunity here if you just abandon this for another couple of years, because it'll come back and you'll have this discussion again. I've been attending these board meetings for probably, 30 years, and it comes up about every 4 or 5 years that maybe we ought to have some mandatory education subjects. So you're only putting it off to have this another discussion when there's a different group of people up here.
Steve, you work for Kaiser. Do you have the specific statistic about how many percentage of your Kaiser pharmacists are in trouble and in what field? So
the answer
first
is
thing
no.
I think you should, then you should get a statistic of what proportion of your pharmacists who work for Kaiser, they are in trouble, whether they have DUI, whether they have corresponding responsibility, or they have drug abuse. If that's the case, maybe you guys, Kaiser, should set a mandatory requirement for the pharmacists to work for Kaiser first. You see what kind of CE they're required to take.
As I mentioned, Victor, I'm not here speaking on behalf of Kaiser.
Then
I'm talking about my general
you to go ahead
information.
and get some statistics from your Kaiser corporations to know what kind of problem your Kaiser pharmacists have
I
first?
attend a lot of meetings, as you know, for pharmacists, not only in this state, but across the country. And I'm speaking on a general acknowledgement. When I go in to speak to university staff and I find out the instructors there are not aware of the current issues, and the faculty. So it's pervasive across, and it doesn't relate to, there's no reason I should believe that Kaiser's any different than CVS or any of the other major
Exactly,
organizations.
that's what I'm saying. If that's the case, within an organization, if they do have a high percentage of pharmacists that got into trouble with certain subjects. Don't you think a
and I'm
corporation
not talking
would
about the ones that are
mandate
into
them
trouble.
to do something first?
I think Ramon had a good point, is maybe we're looking at the wrong things, not the 1 or 2% or whatever the number is that actually get disciplined, but the number of complaints or the number of times that the inspectors find that they are not aware of what's required.
Well, I can add a statistic that I think would help. I've been looking at our discipline cases now for 7 years. I think 50 a month feels right. It might be 40 a month, but, every Friday we get a raft of them in our email that we're supposed to deal with. And it seems to me that the percentage of those that involve, substance abuse, controlled substances, has gone way up in the last few years. That's my impression. But now, when because I scan each one to look, what did they do wrong? What's the offense here? Try to get to as we get all that paper, I try to scan, and it seems like half the time I finally get to it, and it's hydrocodone, it's oxycodone, it's and I don't remember that being the dominant feature when we were looking at this a few years ago. It seems to me that something substantial is going on that we need to
Thanks,
address.
Ramon.
I'd like to comment on that.
Any other public comment? Oh, I'm sorry, Cheryl, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to comment on what Steve just said. And I'm thinking, because listening to what he's saying, and I'm thinking about a lot of the independent pharmacies, a lot of pharmacies where it's not a chain and they're not mandating CE, and like with Kaiser, not sending out things to the, I'm thinking about all these other pharmacies, and even though for the most part I've been feeling like, let me just make my professional judgment, I'm kind of thinking like maybe we do need to do something maybe in the middle, like 2 hours, not 6 hours. Maybe 2 hours that deal with corresponding responsibility law, and making sure all pharmacists have that, and not make it like a 6-hour thing, something kind of in the middle.
Whatever the wisdom of this board is, that is fine. But it seems to me that the assumption is that nobody out there of our licensees, our pharmacy licensees, pharmacists, is concerned about these issues. Nobody out the pharmacists, if you're not going to require them to take an ethics class or to take a class in current pharmacy law or take a class in corresponding responsibility, that they're not going to do it. That's not a high priority. I can't come to believe that. I mean, granted, I too am a pharmacist, but I just can't believe that these people that I know and that I see and that are part of the profession that I'm part of, that there is a general belief that this isn't a priority. I just don't believe that. I think that they are responsible people who want to advance themselves in their profession, stay current, and yeah, we do find stores and we do find pharmacies and we do find pharmacists that have issues. I can't believe that 2 hours, 6 hours, 100 hours are going to change the nature of some people who maybe have a tendency to have a blind eye towards some rules and regulations, and you can have them take all the CE units you want to have them take, but I think that some people aren't going to change, and we're not going to be able to do it with CEs.
Stan, I think.
And I kind of agree with you, Stan, because, as we were talking about the guy who is, the cases, I'm not sure that getting 2 hours of CE is going to make someone stop driving drunk or taking drugs.
And most of it is alcohol related. I mean, there are some that are substance abuse related, but from my viewing of them, all of the years that I've been on the board, I say the predominance is alcohol-related issues.
But then,
I don't think so.
this is me sitting on the fence, but then I kind of tend to agree with Cheryl, too, that I don't remember it at the beginning being 6 hours. That's a lot. And so I'm thinking maybe we put our toe in the water. And, 2 hours of, pharmacy law and ethics every out of 30, that might not be a good place to start. Just to kind of make sure that, people kind of get educated. But, yeah, I don't know. I'm still on the wall.
Good morning.
Hi.
Arizona or New Mexico?
Yes, New Mexico.
Okay.
My name is Lugina Mendez Harper. I'm with Prime Therapeutics, but I also sit on the New Mexico Board of Pharmacy. And I just wanted to share with you what our approach has been in New Mexico related to this. We actually require 2 hours of law CE every 2 years as part of the pharmacist relicensure process. But something that's just a little bit different from what you've been discussing is that we have our New Mexico Board of Pharmacy provide the law CE. And we use this as a mechanism for our inspectors to get around the state, and it's a way for them to directly share, this is what the Board of Pharmacy has done in the last 2 years. These are the changes that we've made in our laws, and this is what it means for you. And then it's also a mechanism where, as a practicing pharmacist in rural New Mexico, when I go to that CE program, I can ask the inspector, is this what this means? Is this how I'm supposed to do it? In a non-threatening, advisory, consultative kind of way, as opposed to, oh my goodness, I'm here because you've had an issue with the regulation. Now, I will share, there's a couple challenges that we had that we worked through. It does require manpower to have Board of Pharmacy inspectors go out and provide CE across the state. So we do have that. We work with our state associations and have those as set programs at various state association meetings, and then the inspectors go out regionally as well. The other issue that we've had to deal with are practicing pharmacists who are registered in New Mexico but may not live in New Mexico. And so we have a provision that if you are registered as a pharmacist in New Mexico and you don't reside in New Mexico, we'll accept ACPE Law CE as a mechanism to satisfy that 2-hour Law CE requirement. But I just wanted to share that approach with you because our inspectors have very positive feedback for us as a board that it's a way for them to go out and share what the Board of Pharmacy is doing and have that dialogue with pharmacists across the state about, what the Board of Pharmacy is doing, issues that we're having. And then we actually do have, because we have that mechanism, we have been able to have discussions about corresponding responsibility and federal things that are happening or opioid issues where maybe the board may have not yet taken action, but it's an issue that we're seeing. Because we have that mechanism in place, they can share that information. So just another approach.
So how many meetings do you have to have a year for your firm?
We have them all across the state, and I think that I can look at the schedule, but I think we have like 10 or 12 meetings a year. And it's fine because the inspectors will couple that, like if they're going to the southeastern part of New Mexico, they'll schedule inspections around in that area in addition to providing that CE.
And approximately how many pharmacists do you have?
You know what, I don't know that off the top of my head.
Do you provide any remote ability, any webinars or recorded programs?
We haven't. We haven't used that technology. Like I said, we've just had our inspectors, as they're going out to different parts of the state, have them, do inspections as well as provide the CE. But I think you guys probably have that capability more than we do. You're a much larger geographic area.
How often do you update the information that's given? Is it once a year?
Every time we have a Board of Pharmacy meeting, if we pass a regulation, they're immediately updating the deck to provide that information to our
I think this is a very good idea. I suggest that the board, I think most of the pharmacists are very cheap, but if we provide a free CE for the law on a substance abuse, I'm sure most of them will sign up and come to attend it. So I think it's a good idea.
I just point out that we have real close to 40,000 pharmacists licensed in the state, scattered throughout the state. The logistics of just educating in live sessions, that number, is a logistical nightmare. That doesn't mean to say, less than a month ago, we did a sterile compounding webinar with the California Hospital Association to help educate about our regs. I speak a lot publicly. Corresponding Responsibility has been one of the major programs we've done, but I also have the opportunity to speak at CSHP and CPHA each year to share information. And right now with Tony Park, we've been filling a room every year at CPHA talking about new pharmacy law. So we're doing some of this. And we're stepping into the point where we're using webinars to help train our staff, because getting just our staff alone at 46 is problematic. So I think that there's a real opportunity here for us to use webinars, although I think the live presentations pose challenges for us and also to the pharmacists, should they be required to take those as live presentations. Just getting someone that may live in Susanville down to Sacramento to attend that live CE session may be problematic.
Well,
I don't know, maybe we learn from,
May I just, you shouldn't leave us online here because things happen. You say New Mexico, so I just Googled mandatory topics, pharmacist continuing education, and state after state, Pennsylvania, Iowa, New York, Florida, and then it turns out the NABP even has a list of all the states, one by one, that mandate various topics as CE. So we'd be becoming an outlier, actually, if we became one of the few states that didn't have any topics mandated at all. It appears to be.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Thought I saw Brian walking up here, no?
He was walked up, but not up here.
Oh, okay.
Madam President,
So there is a motion from, or the recommendation from the committee.
licensing committee at the time of our meeting voted 4-0 in favor of drawing the proposed regulation change, California Code Regulation 1732. That is the committee recommendation.
And then we're hearing from both committees, right? So we'd also need the vote from the other committee.
Currently, this is the committee.
But I thought you said we're doing a joint sort of,
We're lumping them into one discussion. for
right,
our
so what was the
attorneys.
legislative vote?
So the Ledge Committee actually did not take a vote because the board had referred the matter to the licensing committee. They discussed it, and recognized that they had concerns and were going to bring it up while the board was discussing it because it had been referred to the licensing committee.
Okay, all those in favor of the committee's recommendation to eliminate any specific requirements for the CE, please raise your hand.
One, two, three, four, five.
All those opposed? Okay, let's do it again.
wait a minute.
Let's
So
start
we're-
over again.
But, gosh, I'm sorry, we were doing lunch and I didn't hear what you had to say. So we're
voting on the committee's
We're voting on the
recommendation.
licensing committee's recommendation, which was a 4-0 vote at the licensing committee, and the committee recommendation, licensing, is to withdraw the proposed regulation change to California Code of Regulations, Section 1732.5. The change would have been the inclusion of emergency disaster response, patient consultation, maintaining control.
No, wait a minute. I think you're misrepresenting, because I think the committee was supposed to take all those things and condense it into like a 2-hour.
No.
type-
I'm telling you what the committee discussed and what the recommendation is.
Okay, but I thought the charge to the committee was to take those things and eliminate, and move it to one, and the committee decided to take those things and just do nothing.
This was, the committee had
I mean, to get rid of the whole
discussion.
regulation.
It was obviously what the topic was and what the charge of the committee was, and this is the recommendation from the committee.
So the recommendation is to do nothing.
The recommendation is to not change the regulation,
No,
not
the
do nothing.
The recommendation is
The
to
committee does
withdraw the
Altogether,
no
yeah.
regulation.
The recommendation is to
And
remove the
regulation
requirement for
remains
all
the same. It's
6.
been the same for years regarding continuing education. But the committee does work. It does not do nothing.
The recommendation is to do nothing.
Is to leave the regulation as it is.
And if you guys want to propose a 2-hour CE for the committee to work on, we could work on it on the next meeting. But right now, it's on the 6th CE that to be removed.
But wait a minute, but see, Victor, the problem was that the charge from the board at the last meeting was for us to send it back to you. We agreed at the last meeting, we do not want the 6.
Madam President, you have a vote. I'm not quite sure if the vote is final or
so
where we are
I'm-
on the vote.
I think, Debbie, we just need to move forward with the vote. I mean, we can
like
discuss
to call
another
for the vote.
motion, because we have a vote on the table, which is to eliminate, basically
Eliminate the 6.
any requirements.
Yeah, the regulation we've been working on.
Eliminate the pending reg with the 6. That's what it is. We can actually do a motion after that, or
Right.
once we
If
found
you
the
want
results
to
of this
put
vote.
2, we could work on that later to
So it's
put on
to
2.
eliminate the rulemaking process on the
Madam
6.
President, I would like to finish my statement. I feel like I was interrupted. What I was saying was, the board had agreed that we did not want the 6 items. We sent it back to licensing to look at it and try to condense the 6 items into maybe 1. And I think even at the last meeting, the 1 was kind of, possibly ethics and law. As I understand it, licensing took that recommendation to please condense this regulation from 6 to 1 and is making the determination that we don't need the regulation at all. And that was voted 4-0. Then Ledge Reg looked at it, so just because we're combining the 2 committees, I think we need to, your committee voted unanimously to go with this recommendation, and Ledge Reg voted unanimously 4-0 to go against this.
That's not so.
So can,
If you
can,
read-
I,
if you
can I
read-
ask,
if
why
you
did
read-
why did Ledge Reg take this on when it had been forwarded to licensing? I guess that's what I'm confused about.
Debbie, on page 10 of 10 of the Ledge Reg report, the committee discussion and recommendation, it is on, as I said, page 1010, and it's the top of the page, where the committee discussion and recommendation of Ledge Reg was to return the proposal to licensing committee for review and identify a solution to update the reference to a prior version. No, that's not it. Beg your pardon. The bottom of the page. Committee discussion. The committee was advised that the licensing committee voted to remove the dedicated CE requirement. The committee expressed concern with the recommendation coming from licensing and hopes that it is reconsidered during the July board meeting. They didn't vote yea or nay.
We actually did vote, but legal told us that this
Okay.
was a licensing issue and
so-
that what we can do is we could vote. So we voted unanimously to put that statement in there and because we wanted to come back to the full board because unanimously at the Ledge Reg 4-0, people were not in agreement with the
Okay,
change.
and that's where we are. We're at the
Yeah.
full board voting.
Okay,
so
I
Debbie,
just
why
wanted to
don't-
make sure that it was represented, because you were pushing that, licensing was totally for it. We combined it, so I feel like we needed to bring in the opinion of Ledge Reg, which was
Right.
not in support
So
of your action.
What if we do this? Why don't we move forward with a licensing committee recommendation? Then we can consider the Ledge Reg recommendation, depending on that outcome, and then move forward. Because we still have a
Yeah,
committee
we still have to do
recommendation.
something with this recommendation.
Right, and then we can still, there's Ledge Reg had another different
Well, Ledge
recommendation.
Reg makes no recommendation. And Debbie, I'm sorry, but the only
We
thing
do
that
make a
the only thing that I have
recommendation.
to go by is as I read my packet, I read, the minutes of your meeting.
Does this happen after the licensing committee?
Right.
The Ledge Reg? I think the timing was that you didn't have that information at the licensing committee. Could it occurred after that date?
Right.
He's looking at our minutes, and Stan, how the minutes don't always reflect exactly what
Yeah,
happened.
and so
that's why,
that's what I refer to.
Right, and so that's why I felt it was necessary for me to clarify, because you were making a big point, licensing was totally in favor of it. I just wanted to make sure that you understood Ledge Reg was totally against, if you
favor.
could say, the recommendation that we
Okay.
heard that was coming from licensing.
Dueling committees.
But I also
Right.
want to clarify one thing. I know Victor just said, well, let's vote this down, and then we can suggest to the licensing committee, basically to take this regulation again, and maybe you would work on a 2-hour. But I think if that's really where we want to go, then I think that's the wrong path. I think if we really think a 2-hour solution is what we need to do, then we should vote the recommendation down, send this back to licensing to
Right.
look at a 2-hour solution. So that's, I'm sorry, that's what I was trying to enunciate, and I kept getting about halfway through and felt like I was getting
Well,
interrupted.
Debbie, my only question there is, we already sent licensing this thing and asked them to come up with a 2-hour recommendation, and they didn't.
That isn't correct.
So why would we send it
That's not
back to them
correct,
again?
Ramon.
That isn't correct.
I don't think that's correct.
It
All
isn't
right, what
correct.
happened?
Where are you getting your information?
No, I'm asking you, please advise me what happened.
That wasn't the charge that was given the licensing committee, was to review what we did and to come up with a recommendation. That was the direction.
Okay, so let's move forward.
I don't
You-
think anybody expected that the licensing committee was going to just eliminate the whole thing. When we sent it to licensing, the idea was to pare it down, come back with a recommendation of how to do that. And instead of paring it down, we got a recommendation to eliminate the whole thing. So when Ledge Reg heard that, we said, no, that's not what our understanding was. We didn't want to eliminate it. We just wanted to reduce it.
Well, I merely am the chairman of the committee that reports to the board. And the
Right.
report that I made, and I tried to
understand.
substantiate what happened, how it happened, why it happened, what the sense of the committee was. I'm not speaking for myself, I'm speaking for the committee, and I'm making
I know
a
what the
committee
committee did,
recommendation.
yeah.
It is not a personal recommendation.
So can we move forward with the licensing, and then we can deal with the Ledge Reg Committee recommendation? Can we do that? Because I think the licensing was to just withdraw the rulemaking
Well, I think
on the
what-
6th, is that right? On the 6th. I think it's the 6 items, whether the licensing committee is to withdraw the rulemaking specifically on all those 6 items.
All the 6.
Can we do that, and then we can move
Well,
forward with another motion?
In effect, it's the same as withdraw the proposed regulation change. You're withdrawing those 6.
Well, I think you're withdrawing the whole regulation. You're not condensing it, Jenny.
Actually, I kind of hate to throw another, I don't know, stick into the fire or whatever,
Good.
but there is still a reg here that we need to amend. We've got some requirements, we're referring to the wrong accreditation agency in our reg. So we've got, what I would suggest that the board do is, regardless of what it wants to do with this one dedicated CE item, allow the board staff to do a 15-day comment, and if the vote is to remove it, go ahead and adopt the rest of the regulations so that we can straighten out the other CE item that's been sitting there for the better part of maybe 2-3 years. And we've got it noticed, with a 15-day comment, we can move forward. And then the CE, which sounds like it may not be resolved sometime before lunch. I just had to say something, you know it was coming. I think it would allow us to at least allow the CE program to have clear direction, and then how the board chooses to respond to the dedicated CE, you can either do with the licensing committee, with the board, or with Ledge Reg, however it wishes to move.
So you're saying in the meantime, the reg goes forward?
Without the dedicated CE, remove the dedicated CE portion completely from the reg, which we can partition out. If you read the motion, it says
You're
withdraw
saying
it.
bifurcate it.
Yeah, and then allow the rest of it to move forward, and then you can focus on how and if you wish to do dedicated CE.
So Ginny, I'm a little confused. I'm looking at 1732.5, which is an existing reg. Renewal requirements for pharmacists.
Can I offer, I think I might be able to help here. So it looks like in the licensing, the attachments to the licensing package, only 1732.5 is included as attachment 3. But if you look under the Ledge Reg item, under, at the very back of the
Yeah, it
attachments.
says 1732.
That's why you have lawyers.
Another reg that we're
There's
talking about.
Attachment 12.
Sections.
There are 3 sections being amended.
Right.
In the currently noticed rulemaking, correct?
That makes a difference.
So,
Yeah,
and
that's-
I think licensing committee's recommendation was solely to the one particular
Exactly.
section, not to modify the currently proposed amendments to 1732.05 and 1732.2. That sounds
The
correct.
focus of the
Right, you weren't
committee has
there.
been,
Yeah.
on
you were there.
the dedicated CE.
The licensing committee just dealt with 1732.5.
Correct.
Did the Ledge Reg committee have a recommendation on 1732.5?
Right, that's what our recommendation was on.
Yeah.
But there was others.
We were okay with the other ones.
Our recommendation is that it be reconsidered at the board meeting. Our recommendation.
Well, we certainly have done that.
And the reason we recommended it is because legal told us that was the way to go.
Well, I think.
You're blaming Laura now.
Yeah, really. I think it was discussed that it could be an awkward thing. Legally, I don't think it was an issue, but I think it's became a sort of an awkward position
Actually
for
did become an awkward
Ledge
thing.
Reg to be in when licensing had been tasked. And so the conclusion was that certainly you would be able to, as board members, to express your opinions and share your concerns.
Well, how did it go to Ledge Reg when the board sent it
Because
to
it's a
licensing?
regulation.
Because it's a proposed regulation. It was that we were.
They had a list
So
of
we
all the
need to
regs.
talk about how we're going to prevent this from, because this is, two committees are dealing with the same thing. So if the board has already forwarded this to licensing, that should have preempted anything.
But we weren't talking about how to change the regulation. We were looking at the proposed regulation. There's the 3 sections. And so what was reported to us is in the 3rd section, that's going to be killed. That was killed in the licensing committee. And so we were all like, what? You know, we disagree that should have, this
That was
discussion.
but that hadn't gone to the board yet, the licensing committee's recommendation.
Right.
When the Ledge Reg actually considered this.
Right, because it was part of our information that we were provided.
And none of us anticipated that they would kill it. The idea was that they would reduce it.
Okay, so why don't we deal with the licensing committee, since that's what we're talking about, the recommendation, then take a vote on that, and then we can go with the Ledge Reg or another board member recommendation.
Their
So my unders-
recommendation is to kill it.
Oh, exactly, so let's clarify. So your recommendation from the licensing committee, Stan, is to,
Eliminate.
in 1732.5, remove section B, which is at least 6 of the 30 hours. Is that the recommendation?
Right.
From the licensing committee?
In other words, to remove
To keep
specific
1732.5 as it is?
Right.
Is that the recommendation?
Right.
Okay,
That
so
is the recommendation
so that's clear.
4-0 from the.
Remove a
withdraw
a
proposed
specific
regulation.
education requirement.
Well,
Their recommendation is not to change anything, it's to withdraw the proposed regulation.
Right, and, well, it's to keep 1732.5 as is, because it's an existing reg.
That's correct.
Right.
Okay, so that's the committee recommendation.
Well, no, but the committee recommendation is to withdraw the proposed regulation, not to keep it. I mean, it's to
No,
withdraw
no,
the
I'm very
proposal.
clear with them.
Okay.
The fact they basically said, keep 1732.5 as is, do not add section B.
Right, right.
Well,
to
so
withdraw the
where
proposal.
does a vote on this leave us? If, say, this carries, do we still get to discuss the legislative report?
Yes.
And how we're going
Yes,
to?
then we'll do with a Ledge Reg committee recommendation after we finish. Because we have an awkward situation because we've got two committees that have dealt with the same thing.
So we'll get another shot at, another bite at this apple, so to speak?
That's what we're told.
That's what we're being told, right? We're going to get another bite at
No,
this
no,
apple?
I think what the Ledge Reg committee did something differently than the licensing. Licensing is just dealing with 1732.5, correct? So that's the committee recommendation.
Right.
Okay, so do we need any more public comment, or can we take a vote on
I
this?
just have one question. If we vote to withdraw this regulation, then Ledge Reg can't vote to bring it back in, right?
Well, it would be essentially a motion to reconsider.
Okay.
Because the full board is voting, so all of the
Right.
members are here and have heard the discussion. So if the vote is to delete it, the practical impact, and I apologize, I don't remember which member raised it, is that because this is already noticed, the notice has issued, the 45-day comment period went out, and what would happen is you would send out a notice of 15-day modified text, striking the originally proposed changes, and then you would see the comments from that again. So,
But where does the second bite of the apple come into play?
so I think in terms of if there were comments about the sort of the deleting it out again, then you might see it again at the end of the, or at the next stage of the rulemaking.
Well, what
Because you've got
about,
those
what
other
about
two
today?
sections.
We won't get to discuss it again today?
I think it depends on whether or not the motion carries.
Well, if the motion carries, you're saying we don't get to discuss this again today, and the
Well-
Ledge Reg report doesn't get to bring it up.
Well, I mean, I think they bring it up, but it's moot.
But we won't be able to take any action.
It's moot. I mean, unless
That is a
there's-
reconsideration?
It would be a reconsideration
Yeah.
of the prior motion, really.
Well, okay, now to get all parliamentary, to make a motion to reconsider, at least where I was brought up, you have to vote with the majority side, and then you can make a motion to reconsider. I don't know if you want to get that technical, but that's Robert's rules on votes for
That's what
reconsidering.
we're assuming, Ramon. We're assuming that your question was if the vote carries, the committee's vote.
Well, then, if, for example, I do want to discuss this, and I have to vote aye, so that I can then make a motion to reconsider when it comes back up under the legislative committee's
Yeah,
report.
but if we vote no and it gets thrown out, then we can go and decide what to do from that point.
Well, no, what I just heard Laura say is that if this motion carries, we're done discussing this today.
Well, no, I mean, I think you could have a motion to reconsider the vote, but you've already discussed it rather thoroughly, so I'm not sure that the likelihood seems, it seems
Laura.
unlikely, but it's certainly an option. Legally, you can reconsider the motion.
If what we wanted to do was to end up with a situation where we are going to mandate 2 hours of legal and ethics, if that's what we want to wind up with.
And you're saying what we wanted to do, you're talking about at the prior board meeting before
As
this was referred to
If the board decides
licensing.
that they want to end up that way, what do we need to do now with this motion?
So you would need to vote down the current motion, and
Have to
then
vote it
there
down.
would be a second motion to
Because
revise.
if we vote for it to carry, we just lost our chance to get the 2 hours of.
Yes. All those in favor of the committee's recommendation to essentially keep 1732.5 as is, raise your hand.
Is to eliminate the 6C, right?
You know what, I'm voting yes too. 5.
Yeah, the problem is, I don't want the 6 either, but we're really not voting on the,
We don't want the 6, but she says the only way we can wind up
the only way
with
we can
2
make it 2
is
is
to vote it
to vote down the 6.
Let's finish voting. You guys haven't finished voting yet.
Okay, okay, did everybody understand what we're voting on? We better clarify that.
6, right?
No, we're voting to eliminate the provision
Discussion.
altogether.
Right. If we vote aye on this, we don't get to discuss it.
Right.
Well, I mean,
If you want
can.
to.
Wait, let's let Laura give us, what does an I vote here mean, Laura?
An I vote means you're voting to delete, you're accepting the committee's recommendation to delete the proposed language at subdivision B in 1732.5.
Which means we will not be able to have specific education mandated.
I mean, don't get me wrong, you can't, there's nothing prohibiting you from making another motion. Maybe I misunderstood
Well, you
here.
said if we
I feel like
propose it
we're-
at ledge reg, then it's a reconsideration, and that's what you
But
said.
the full board can still have that motion
Yeah.
brought today.
Second one.
As,
But
we have
this
the
is to
full board here, it
eliminate
doesn't
the
matter what
6.
the ledge reg did.
I just heard Laura say we can't bring it up again today if this carries.
That's what I thought.
No, you
Well,
can always.
So I was thinking that when we sent this to licensing before, we already all agreed we don't want the 6. So I feel
No,
like
no,
we've
you didn't say that.
already-
No, that
we've
wasn't
already
agreed.
Put it down to 6.
Okay, Laura, if a member of the board wanted to change the 6 to the 2, what would be the best way to vote on this, so to make that happen?
So, now I see where you guys are going.
That's what I think,
that's
what I'm
requirement.
hearing come out.
So-
They don't know how to vote if their
okay.
feeling is to
If
go
the
to 2.
feeling is to reduce
And
it.
everyone keeps
Okay.
saying by voting aye, you're saying down with the 6. Oh, I'm down with the 6.
So can you give us our options as a voting board
So
member?
I think there's 2 ways of handling it. So you can vote to accept the motion that would delete this language. Then there could be either a reconsideration of that and a revised motion, or an alternate motion that would say reduce the 6 to 2, or some other number that you think is appropriate. Another option would be to amend the regulation to add in 2 hours or whatever the number is, again, that provide XYZ.
But in order to amend, we would have to turn down the committee's recommendation?
Oh, you amended.
No, I think you could still do it, but I think given that the committee's recommendation is to, I think if your desire is to modify it, I think the cleanest motion is to say no to the current motion, and then wait for a second, or propose a second motion, an alternate motion, to reduce from 6 to whatever the number is, 2 or another number.
Okay. So voting yes on this motion means...
Amy, is that the consensus of most of the board members that you want to reduce the 6 to 2? Is that all you guys want? I mean, if that's the case, maybe why don't we send it back to the licensing committee? We'll come back out with another recommendation.
I would second that.
Right, for considering 2.
And say, this time we want 2.
Yeah.
Okay, in considering 2. Then we could
But
go
we
back
need
to
to
the
vote down,
licensing
but we need to
committee.
vote
Wait, we have a
down the
motion on the table that we need to deal with.
But then but if otherwise, in that case, we would have to vote down the 6 first.
Right,
Yes.
Okay.
And then you refer it back to the licensing committee.
Okay.
right. So...
Okay, so is...
So we can refer back to licensing with the direction to make it 2.
Right.
have a
Yes, I'd like
motion
to
on the
understand what we're
floor.
voting on.
So we would have to vote that
We have to vote this
in order
down.
to do the other. Okay.
Okay, all in favor of the licensing committee's recommendation, raise your hand.
No,
You have to vote down the 6.
no.
No, if you're voting yes,
You're saying that we can't go to 2 now. By doing that, we
could-
can't go to the 2.
You could go and come back later. You have to vote down the 6 first.
yeah, but I want to make sure that the board members understand what they're voting on, because that's important.
So I would recommend that you just take this vote, and then if the board would like to make another motion afterward, we'll deal with that motion separately. So
all right.
just
So
deal with
let's
the
just
current
deal with
motion.
this
We'll get what you
motion.
need.
Down this one first.
Go
Okay,
ahead.
so all in favor, raise your hand.
Okay, 6.
Opposed? 3, so no abstains. Okay.
So now we're done.
So now can we make a motion to make it 2?
Yes.
No, I think you can. So what I
You said
would
we
say is
cannot?
you-
You-
Yes, I
Yes.
think you can.
Yes.
Oh, good.
So,
I would have voted down the 6 if I knew I could reconsider.
Okay.
yes.
We've already done
This is on your, yes.
Now we can reconsider, and we can make it 2
So Laura,
and send it
what
back.
do you recommend now at this point if someone were wanting to change this to 2 hours?
So I think what you'd say is you would now recommend that the regulation be modified in such a way as to require whatever it is that you want it to
Okay,
require.
I move to...
But we've just gotten rid of the regulations, so now we're asking to reconsider.
No,
the vote.
let's let
It is
Greg's
on
got
the
a motion he's going to put on the table.
Right, okay.
And there's we all the time during board meetings. This is not a big deal right here. This is, we voted down the motion of the committee.
No, we voted for the motion of the
We
committee.
voted for the motion of the committee, which basically eliminated
The regulation.
the regulation language in subdivision B. The board can now substitute a motion to alter the number. That's all you're doing. It's fine.
Which Greg
We
is
do this all
about
the
to
time.
make.
Right.
Okay, I think we normally do it the other way.
So
but
let's let Greg do his
Okay,
motion.
Let me make a motion.
modify the language and vote for the new language.
It was a negatively phrased.
Okay, I
Okay,
make
Gre-
a motion to
Greg.
modify in order to make it so that 2 hours are required in the areas of law and ethics. Period.
Is there a second to Greg's motion?
Well, I'll second for
You'll
discussion.
second it?
Sure.
Okay, public comment.
Well,
Wait, can we restate the motion again?
Greg, do you want to
you're-
restate your motion?
Okay,
so you're asking for reconsideration, right?
yeah, I'm asking for reconsideration in order to have a mandate for 2 hours required education. I said law and ethics, but I think...
In law and ethics courses?
Yeah.
In
law-
law
Okay.
and ethics, not the existing list.
Right.
Well,
Laura, is that okay?
Yes.
So we're
Okay.
actually asking to reconsideration to reinstate what we
Right.
just withdrew, except modifying it to 2 hours and law and ethics.
Okay, so Ramon, you seconded that?
Yes.
Okay, is there any board comments?
Yes, I think 2 hours and 6 hours, that's no different. I would prefer the Board of Pharmacy go to different section of the California, up in the coast, provide a free CE on the substance abuse and the law and ethic, free CE for those classes. But for me, 6 hours and 2 hours, no different.
Any other board comments? Public comment?
I actually do
Oh,
have a comment, because I would like this to, and maybe this is part of the thing, I would like this to go back to licensing, because I'm still not convinced that we need CE, and maybe it's just a matter of establishing like webinars on a regular basis that people can dial in and watch versus mandating CE.
So,
But so I kind of wanted to go back to licensing, because I want them to figure it out.
So I think
versus-
the challenge with that, that recommendation is that this language has already been noticed. So if you're going to issue a 15-day notice of modified text, I think the 1 year is going to run out before licensing meets again. I think it was noticed originally in September, is that correct? So you're going to run out of time. So once the formal rulemaking process starts, the board has 1 year to get it basically to the doorstep of OAL for their final review. And then OAL has a certain amount of time to review. There's a couple exceptions in there, but that's the standard practice. So right now, the language of the 3 sections, the ones that were attached to the Ledge Committee, those are all noticed. It's been, the 45-day comment period has ended. You've received comments, you've, seen it. So it's depending on what the board does now, it'll determine what happens with the final language. So if it waits to go to the licensing committee again, your licensing committee, I think, is scheduled for September 21st or somewhere end of the month. And I think this was originally noticed in early September. Oh, okay. Needless to say, if the licensing committee modifies the language, then you wouldn't have time to do a 15-day notice of modified text, see any comments if there were any, and then basically get it to OAL within that 1 year period. Now, that's solvable if you want to basically do what your executive officer recommended and bifurcate this section from the other 2 sections and say, okay, so we're not going to take this on right now. We'll still send it to licensing committee, but we'll deal with that as a separate regulation. So it would be its own, only this particular section would be in a subsequent rulemaking process. Does that make sense?
So we're going to open a new rulemaking for this?
You would, that's
With the
how,
licensing committee's
If you refer it to
recommendations?
licensing, you would almost certainly have to
And
do
that's what
that.
we want to do. No.
Victor?
I was just wondering if it's possible that we just mandate them to attend one of the sports sponsor CE every 2 years. That would be even simple. Then you could be a new laws, real regulations, all related subjects that's determined by the board. And every 2 years, if they have to come in to attend one of the CE sponsored by the board, which often is free, it doesn't matter if it's 2 hours or 4 hours that Jeannie dictate, but it will be for good things to update all the pharmacists throughout the state, and better than sending them all over to take all the other CEs on laws and ethics.
I think the recommendation that Debbie made was if it
But-
goes back to licensing,
could
all that
that-
discussion could take place.
Right, I'm just asking Laura, could that be incorporated into this amendment, that we could set it up for the 15 days comment period, or we have to do otherwise?
Now I'm confused again because I'm not.
If
but
we
you want-
mandate them to take a board sponsor CE every 2 years.
The board sponsor
Board
CE,
sponsor
does-
CE every 2 years.
Do we?
You propose, this is
Okay.
Yes.
So that would be an amendment to the motion that's
Yeah.
currently pending. I think
I would accept that amendment.
you would, I don't know for sure, it would depend on whether or not you have existing board, I don't know if it's board-sponsored or,
Board
Well, I was going to ask what that is.
provided
Board
is maybe
provided
a better
What
term.
what provided
Does
CE?
the board have an ability to put on E? CE?
We do all the time.
Yeah.
But to educate all 39,000 pharmacists with active licenses may have to rely on things like using the newsletter, so you could do written forms, may do webinars, may do in person.
Webinars, yeah.
But we already do that. We already do
Yeah,
the
we already do
newsletter.
that now, yeah.
What, could we
You
just
could.
take
They-
send this back to licensing and have them review all these options
Right.
and come up with a well-thought-out solution?
They could attend in person, they could attend in webinar. There's a few things they could do to attend that, and that would be one of the
Why
requirements
can't
for.
we just do that
I
today?
second that.
Yeah, why can't we
We've
just
already
do
got a
that
motion.
today? We
Okay.
have a motion.
Second.
and
Let's-
I
there's a
agree.
motion
I
f-
accepted the amendment.
Okay, and can you restate?
Send it back to licensing?
No. Can you restate your motion and your amendment, Greg, so everyone's clear?
Okay. The motion is to require attendance either by webinar or however, at least every 2 years, a board-sponsored,
Board,
Ethics and law.
board provided.
Board-provided.
update of hot top, update, update of the legal and ethics area.
Well, and if it's going to be CE, then there's got to be a test and so forth that they really did it.
Yeah.
So Ramon, you seconded it. Are you okay with
Yeah, no, I'm
those
fine with that as
amendments?
long as we're talking real CE.
Right.
Of
course.
The only thing is you said attendance, so does that mean it,
Well, attendance is what caught my attention.
Participation.
or how about just board supplied? Because
Board provided,
that
yeah.
could be
A board
like
provided, right.
paper or whatever. I mean,
Must participate in a board-provided, program.
And the board would track
yeah,
the,
does not have to be in person.
Board-provided program every 2 years of
2 hours.
2 hours, legal and ethics update.
Got it.
board would provide it and track attendance
Right.
and give CE certificates.
Right.
Are you limited to just the ethic and, well, I would like to see substance abuse, law and
I think that's
ethic,
covered in an
or whatever they decide to provide.
Would be covered in an update of law and ethics.
Yeah, yeah, I think I'd like that.
So this board-provided CE, is that going to be mandatory?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
And Ginny, what is our capability to do this right now in terms of tracking and issuing the CE?
Well, we would require that, we may want to modify a little bit the form to make sure that they earn the CE, or we could spot check it, because what we really don't want to have happen, just from the logistics of having 39,000 sheets of paper coming in with our 2 units of CE on there, there's probably some way we could track that, but we could do that somehow. By amending the renewal form stating that they do it, and then we check our attendance records. It'll be a lot of work for us because we're going to have to track the attendance piece of it. But absent that, doing a 2-hour CE program, we do those as much as we can because it's an important way for us to educate our licensees. And I'd argue that that's something we should be doing anyway. So,
And
we
it's
are
not, it's
doing
not
it.
a big thing to track who
No,
takes
yeah,
a course.
Well,
Well, no, I
For 40,000 people.
Do it
I'll
by-
remind, you're off the board, Ramon. I
Let's
will
move
remind
on.
you, we'll
Let's
bring
move
you in
on.
to help.
And just to answer,
Electronic.
and just to ask the question about the out-of-state licensees, they will be able to obtain this without being in state.
I would see no reason, I don't see how we can logistically provide the CE live to people just in the state, which means there'll be alternatives available for webinars or newsletters or some other form of presentations, which would allow the people out of state to do it as well.
Right, so because I made sure that the way he phrased it, it's not just live, it's live
Right,
webinar
it's not
or,
just live.
or on paper. So
Right.
people outside the state will just,
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a.
With
We have a motion and we have a second.
I want to
We
be
have
as,
public comment.
yeah, I think I would like to help you wordsmith it a little bit, just to make it really clear what we're requiring,
As long as
because,
it says what I want
because
to
since
say.
it sounds like you want this to go into the current regulation package, we want the language to be as sharp, as clean as possible. So if I understand, you would like at least 2 hours of the 30 hours required for a pharmacist license renewal to be completed through participation in a board-provided CE course in laws and ethics, laws or ethics?
Well, I'd like an update. Update. 'Cause-
That's kind of inferred, though, isn't it? Law and,
Not, so you don't want the
Flowers
law
update
and
is all you're
ethics
gonna get.
limitation? You just want anything that's board-provided?
yeah, law, I mean, you could actually argue the corresponding responsibility is part of law.
Yeah,
So that's
it
actually
is.
broad enough to
It
be
is.
able to place
Yeah.
whatever we believe is important.
What does Judy want to do?
Keep in mind, if we do the course today, we would have to update it before the end of the 2-year period, or else it loses a lot of its relevancy. So I would see that we'd have to maybe change the course once a year anyway, so that it stayed consistent. So whether somebody, as long as they take it once per renewal period, there may be 2 different courses, or maybe even more out there at
We'll
the
just
same.
call it law and ethics.
Yeah,
and not an
but
update.
you want it to be current, or else there's no value in
Okay,
doing
yeah,
that
right.
either.
Okay, law and ethics, right,
So
Can we add drug abuse on it?
fine.
That could be
Well,
under
that's
that.
included.
If you keep it broad, Albert, you can actually decide what we
Law and
want the
ethics will
content to
cover it
be.
all.
Okay. Okay, so at least 2 of the 30 hours required for pharmacist license renewal shall be obtained or received? Obtained?
Obtained is fine.
What is the language in our current? Shall be completed,
The completed,
I think is what the current
that's the
draft
current,
says.
yeah, the current, completed by participation in a board-provided CE course in law and ethics.
Right,
Is that okay?
yep. That's every 2 years.
And what do you recommend, Ann?
I'm looking to see, I think after July 1, 2018, we're 2 years away from that right now. The CE course itself wouldn't, the CE course itself would not be, I don't believe, too difficult to do. All the other pieces, so maybe make it July 2019.
Okay.
Renewals, and that'll give us 3 years from
Years?
today. That'll give us well, we can have it in place sooner, but that'll at least, keep in mind, the regulation from this point is going to take a little time to do, and then we're going to have to deal with how can we assure everybody's really complied with this requirement piece?
Is that okay to
That's
amend it?
fine, just so long as
By
we
July
get it.
1st, 2019?
Yes.
Ramon, you're okay with that? Okay.
2019?
Yeah, I just added 1 year. Right
Okay.
now, we've got
19.
2018,
So
I just added.
in the
God,
prior
that seems like
language that no
forever.
longer exists, but in the prior language, it says the pharmacists renewing their licenses which expire on or after July 1, and then we're going to substitute 2019 for 2018, shall be subject to the requirements of this subdivision. So
Right.
anybody renewing after that point is going to have to
Right.
check the box that they completed that board-provided CE in law and ethics.
And if we could get it up
Right.
sooner, they can use the CE credit for their current CE.
Yep, perfect. Okay, any public comment? Otherwise, we'll take a vote.
Okay,
Good morning,
here we go.
Rebecca.
It was awful quiet out there anyway. We knew it was coming. No, this is why we're doing this.
Admittedly, I had to step out for a few minutes, so if this was already covered, please forgive me and just tell me to go sit down and be quiet. But was there a review of what other states have done along these same lines? And was that discussed?
A little one.
Okay, because this is definitely not unprecedented. And so one concern that I have is board provided versus maybe board approved, because a lot of platforms are currently available that pharmacists have a lot of access to, let's say Pharmacist Letter, for example, that a lot of employers already provide for their pharmacists, and so it's a very easy and very trackable way, but you would have control of the content and what you require during a particular cycle. So many states do that currently, you know, and you can see on that platform as an example what's required by the state for your next renewal cycle. So if I'm understanding, one of the concerns might be the infrastructure, and that already exists at least in some platforms. So I just wanted to mention that as something to consider.
Rebecca, New Mexico State, the lady just came in and testified that they are doing that in the state.
Board provided.
Hey, John.
John Roth, CPHA CEO. So a couple of concerns. One is that I believe that if you were to ask the person who testified from New Mexico, the benefit in making it board provided was that it got the inspectors face-to-face with the licensees. The motion that I'm hearing on the table is providing it from the board in all different avenues via technology,
Right.
perhaps live, et cetera. So I don't know that there's an importance in having it board provided. And the concern is that, you know, what are the cost implications to the board around that, and ultimately then the licensing fees that could be affected. So I think board approved, if you want to go down the pathway of mandating CE, do it as was previously established, where the board would simply have a CE provider of any approved entity providing that CE. I think you lose the nuance of the board itself providing it if you don't have your inspectors face-to-face with the licensees pursuant to the woman's testimony previously. We still oppose the measure on its principle, still support the prior motion that was adopted, and believe that it should be the pharmacist's professional responsibility if they feel they need law and ethics or any other CE component to seek that out as part of their professional responsibility.
Thanks, John. Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand.
We may have one more comment.
Oh, one more comment? I'm sorry. I didn't see you. I'm reading your law actually right now that says pharmacists practicing in New Mexico must attend one of the law update programs presented by the board. In your law, okay.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to address the gentleman's comment. So I had just stated that we do have, it's live, and our Board of Pharmacy Inspectors provide it, and that allows us, because our goal is to have a mechanism where we can share with our registrants what the Board of Pharmacy has done. So we control the content, so we're able to share with them, these are the regulations that have passed, this is, you know, what the thought process was and what we were trying to address. Anecdotally, our inspectors share with us that they find a lot of value in the face-to-face interaction where they're able to clarify and be more consultative. But that's why we've opted for board-provided versus board-approved, because we want to be able to share, to use this as a mechanism in addition to newsletters or in addition to the state register, you know, talking about the legislation or the regulations that we've passed. This is just another more high-touch way for us to share with our registrants what we have done as a Board of Pharmacy. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear.
Thank you.
So you don't think it makes a difference if it's directly with the inspector or not, as long as it's board provided and controlled?
From a Board of Pharmacy, from a board member perspective, all the content, so we know that we're giving them the update of what we have done as
Right.
a board. But I like the live component.
Right.
You know,
But New Mexico's
but
a
I
lot
realize
smaller.
it's logistically difficult. It's been very difficult for us.
Right.
And we have live CE every month. I looked that up while I was sitting there, but we do it once a month.
So you don't have webinars that they have to go to the computer?
No, we have webinars.
Has to be a live session?
All
Right.
alive.
If, you know, you don't
Ours are
have
all live.
webinars because of
I think
lack of
that's our-
technology,
yes.
or
Yeah.
is it because your preference
That's our limitation.
is a lack of technology? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, you might not get the same interaction that you're talking about if it's webinar also.
Right, but at the same time, we as a Board of Pharmacy still are able to control we're able to say, okay, here's the things that we did at X board meeting, here's the things we did at Y board meeting and why we did that. And, you know, say that we've provided education to our registrants on what our expectations are and what new regulations we've passed.
Thank you.
Jenny,
All right.
I prefer life also.
We do too, and we'll offer it if we can. We would attempt to build that in.
Okay, so there's a motion and there's a second. All in favor, raise your hand, please.
For the sake of a unanimous vote.
I don't know,
and
there's one hand
unity,
down. There's one hand down,
The
so.
Thank you,
chair
Stan.
of licensing supports the chair of ledge reg.
Thank you.
Okay, motion passes. I've been asked if we can just take a quick 5-minute break for restroom break. And Ginny, did you have something you wanted to say?
Let me bring it up after we allow Ms.
Yes.
Kirkmeyer to provide her
sense.
presentation. And then I have one more thing. I need to return to this issue, but we'll return to
Okay.
it at the end.
So we'll do a 5-minute bathroom break, then we'll have Kim come up. Okay, thanks.
Done before lunch.